So welcome everybody to this interview. This is David Hamilton from socialexpression.net, and we've got Sean Cooper from stopyourshyness.com. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of different subjects on social anxiety. I'm really happy to be here with you, Sean, and I'm glad that you reached out to me to do this. Actually, you were the one who initiated, so good to be here with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to talk to you today too, David.
Cool. So we've had a lot of exchanges over email, and I have definitely a lot of questions for you that I think will benefit a lot of people listening to this, and I also have my take on some of these questions. So we might as well just get right into it.
Yep, sounds good.
Cool. So first, I would like to hear some about your social anxiety story and how you've made a lot of progress in overcoming it so it no longer basically dominates your life.
Okay. Yeah, so basically, when I was growing up, I had really bad social anxiety to the point where I couldn't even really like talk to people normally or make eye contact. In class, I would always be like scared to speak up or raise my hand or
Yeah.
do speeches. And that basically continued up until maybe 3 years ago, um, when my social anxiety, it got to the point where like I was kind of sick and tired of having it. So I decided to figure out how to fix it. So I went out and I read a ton of books, a ton of audio courses, basically looked at almost all the information that was out there on overcoming shyness or social anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and I decided to fix my issue. How about you, David? What's your story related to
Yeah,
social
mine is,
anxiety?
mine, it's funny. I was talking with somebody about this actually last night, and it probably goes back further than I thought, which was funny when we were talking about being in class. It's such a huge one. But really, a lot of it started when I went from elementary school, here in the States we call elementary school, to junior high or middle school. And it's kind of on that awkward transition between, for me it was awkward because not only is it between that transition into puberty, but I actually moved states to a different, and lost all my friends and everything that I had. And, I was on the shy side already as a kid. So when I moved from a state called Idaho to Colorado, I didn't know anybody, and I took to my studies a lot and hit the books, and was kind of pretty much nerdy, pretty much the nerd kid. And over the years, I struggled with it, especially in class. I remember having teachers call me out for being smart, and other kids would you know, pick on me, and right, in a sense, rightfully so. I didn't ever agree with the teachers doing that because they're kind of using me as an example to make light of these other kids who are having problems, learning for whatever reason, or problems at home. I really thought that was unskilled of the teachers. And I think it really set in then emotionally in many ways. And it continued out through, 20s and 30s. Now, I'm one of those ones who saw other people and said, well, if they can do it, I can. And I kind of say that I made lists of like behaviors to correct well into my adulthood, like make more eye contact, say hi more, smile more. And sometimes I would, but I never had that consistency that I wanted because it was almost like I was faking it on the outside and not matching up with what I felt on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't even until the last few years that I came upon some programs and some work and really said, I gotta get to the root of this and really handle this. And I really dove in and handled so much of it. And then I decided to start a blog, socialexpression.net, and then eventually create a course and do coaching and mentoring around overcoming social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I am here today. And, for me, I still experience it. Sometimes I experience it. And the more that I talk to people about it that don't necessarily have it, they go, I feel social anxiety at times. So everyone feels a certain amount at certain times. And obviously what we're talking about here is when it's all pervasive in your life and it really dominates. It's all you think about. It just like stops you from leaving the house or going to a party or
Yeah.
getting a job, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know like when I first started, there'd be like no chance of me like having any friends at all. I'd feel so much anxiety. Or
Yeah.
even going to the grocery store and buying something from the grocery store, I'd feel extremely anxious. Like it was a long time ago, but I remember like I'd be like sweating and like shaking, having these physical symptoms of anxiety too.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think the people watching this are all at like different stages, maybe very socially anxious or maybe just shy in like a few situations.
Yeah.
But the goal is like to take the level of like social comfort that you feel and like expand that into every area of your life, because I think almost everybody, even if they do have social anxiety or shyness, they do have like one or two people, maybe like a sibling or one close friend that who they can talk to. So the idea is like to take that personality and like expand it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, and that, like you said, everybody's at different levels, and some people have figured out how to break through some stuff on their own. They're still seeking more help, and some people, I get comments all the time on my Facebook page, YouTube channel, my blog, or through emails and stuff about people being at various levels, and uh, sometimes they really have a hard time getting in the house. Sometimes they just feel anxious and they're able to bust through it, but they're tired of feeling that way all the time.
Hmm.
I get really tired of it. Yeah. So, what do you think is the root cause of all this social anxiety stuff, if there is one?
Um, well, it's difficult to say. Like nobody has actually nailed down like one single cause. The best
Mm,
the best ideas that people have been able to come up with is to say that it's usually a combination of causes. Um, Parts of it are like genetic. There's some people have like a predisposition to developing shyness or social anxiety because of a certain type of sensitivity in their brain,
yeah.
and other parts are environmental, basically accidents in their environment. So, for example, like you said, that at a certain time in your life, you moved to a different state, so you lost all your friends,
Hmm.
uh, and that caused your social anxiety to become worse or your shyness. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of people who do have shyness or social anxiety, they can trace it back to like some events in their life.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, there are people who did also move to like different states and they didn't get social anxiety. So I think it's always like a combination of environment and genetic factors, and you
Yeah.
can't completely nail it down to any one factor.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
I mean, yeah, from what I've seen and read, is for the most part, social anxiety itself specifically isn't, it's pretty rare that it's genetically passed on. I have heard of some cases and been emailed by some people saying my mom has it, my sister, my dad, my brother, or a bunch of them have it. Um, and so it's always interesting to say, well, did it kind of get bred into the genetics at some point on the line? So it was environmental and then it became. So there is that, but that's a smaller percentage versus people are predisposed to anxiety in general, maybe being a little anxious, and then that emotional experience happens, that social embarrassment happens in some way, and it gets burned into the brain, burned into our biology, and then it's not really, we're not aware of it when it happens. So there it is, and it's encoded in our system, and now it's running our world, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, so to me, I mean, it's interesting to note that what most people say is some experience that happens, because you'll see a lot of people saying, well, this is just the way I am, and this is it. And I see a relation to the high sensitivity, because I was a highly sensitive kid and I'm still a highly sensitive person. I pick up on things and emotions and intuitions and stuff. And I've been told this by many different people over the course of time, that I do that. And I was like, and I didn't even know. And the more that I pay attention to that, the more I can realize too, part of the introvert thing too plays into it as well.
Hmm.
Um, the stimulus, in environments too, and realizing that it can be an energetic thing, that it may not always be social anxiety, maybe an energetic thing, but you know, I talked with a friend the other day, and we call ourselves outgoing introverts.
Hmm.
Um, I love that term because we're still introverts, and we used to be shy or socially anxious, and we've learned how to not be, but we still need to recharge. We still need to have that downtime.
Yeah.
We're not the life of the party. Hey, gregarious, jumping out there, boom. You know, the classic extrovert who needs to feed the energy off of
Yeah.
others around them.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's definitely a misconception a lot of people have. The difference between introversion and shyness or social anxiety. I
yeah,
think I'm definitely still an introvert too, and I also tend to
yeah,
be like really low energy. So if I'm at a party,
yeah,
I have in the past like once or twice been like a high energy guy like at a party, but usually like
yeah,
I need like time to recharge. Like I enjoy solitary activities, but the difference
yep,
between introversion and shyness and social anxiety is because one is based more in of like a fear of social judgment. The other is more
yeah.
of like a preference of what you like to do.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. Definitely. And the way you recharge your energy and to see introversion as a strength. Because there's times I mean, I can get wild and crazy and jump around and have fun, but it's not the whole time or it's, you know, it's going to be um, much lower than a typical extrovert.
Hmm.
Yeah. Uh, you know, I read over your course and I loved it, your ebook course, basically, your ebooks. And a lot of what you talk about is exactly what I talk about and teach,
Hmm.
with some minor differences here and there, just probably different styles or something. Now, I noticed that you've talked about how social anxiety um, isn't necessarily a personality trait, um, or what is, you know, is it, if we look at it from a disease standpoint, is it a disease, a disorder? What is this thing? And I know we talked about it a little bit here a couple minutes ago, but you know, when I get people saying this is just the way I am or have this disorder, you know, what do you think about that whole
Hmm.
subject?
Um, it's it's an interesting question for sure. It kind of relates back to what we were just saying about introversion.
Mm,
I think there is like to a certain extent, like people do have some parts of their personality which are fixed.
mm,
Um, but I think it's a lot less than what most people assume to be true. And I
mm,
think when it comes to social anxiety, it's not like a personality trait. It's more of a situational reaction. It's
mm,
uh, it's basically a way that your mind and body have learned to react to different situations because it expects danger. I mean, basically,
yeah,
what social anxiety is like a fight or flight response to what it perceives as danger. Like when you walk up in front of a room and you have to do public speaking in front of a lot of people, basically
yeah,
there's a circuit in your brain which is the reason why you get anxious is because part of your brain is uh, is worried about the disapproval because it relates back to survival. I don't know how much we can get
mhm,
into this here, but that's
yeah,
basically that's what science tells us what happens.
right,
Um,
yeah,
and you can see it in yourself, like observe like how you act in different situations. Like if you have a couple of people who you're comfortable around, you
yep,
can be you can talk to them fairly easily. When you're around
mhm,
people who you're not that comfortable around, you can't talk to them so easily.
mhm,
So um, so if you observe your own behavior, you see that it changes and it fluctuates depending on the situation, and that
yeah,
means it's not really part of your core personality. That's my opinion.
interesting,
Yeah.
interesting, yeah,
How about you?
yeah,
What do you think of the?
yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, if we're talking about, you know, the disorder, I call it a condition, because I can see people getting so identified with I am, you know, I have this, and basically that I am in a sense this disorder,
Hmm.
that that becomes their life, and it's a tricky mental game, mental emotional game, and you know, it's in a sense we're filtering the world through I'm disorder and I'm always recovering versus, okay, when's the point where I'm going to let this go and say, depending on the progress made, it's like I've had this condition and now it's not me. It's really not me. It's not like my core personality, like you said.
Yeah.
It might be part of something that I deal with, but it's not me. Just on the same token as, I don't want to get too philosophical, is that I'm not necessarily David. That's just the name I've been given, right? You could just like you could change your name. Not that there aren't certain behaviors associated with this and reactions in social situations, but it's the same thing. While some people go to the store and they're just freaked out, and they could be driving and they're fine, and then vice versa. Somebody's driving and they freak out, and then going to the store is easier for them. So what is in different situations it can show up differently. Because somebody's quiet at a meeting and they're new to a meeting and they don't know the social structure and the hierarchy and who's the boss, doesn't mean they have social anxiety. Maybe they're listening and checking out when it's appropriate to respond and their place in that hierarchy as well, which isn't necessarily social anxiety, but it's easy to assign that to everywhere I go. Okay, well, if I'm not speaking, then there must be something. Well, let's take a look at the beliefs and story constructed around that and how that's filtering our realities. That's the approach I use. And I certainly, when I work with people, I don't work with everybody. I explain this is how I view it. And if you're on board with that and you think that that's, the route that's going to help you, then cool. And if not, great. I take a particular vantage point and looking at this as you are not this kind of embodied living story of social anxiety that has been burned in, we've taken on, through language, emotions, and definitely in our brain and our body disposition or our body chemistry even in certain regards. Which makes me think of the next question, which is, what do you think about, can be kind of a touchy subject, medication and treating social anxiety or even anxiety disorders. A lot of people are on medication when they are part of my, Facebook group or email me or whatever. And they're like, I'm on medication and I'm doing the therapy or whatever. And I have my own thoughts about it. I'm curious what you think.
I personally never used anxiety medication to recover. Basically, my view on it is if somebody has extremely severe social anxiety, then maybe it could be useful to see a psychiatrist. But typically, the approach that most people take is it's not a permanent solution. It's basically a temporary crutch to get you started on exposure. And they basically, if you are taking medication for something like social anxiety, the idea is like you slowly take less and less medication and not become dependent on the medication. It's kind of similar, I think, to how a lot of people need to use alcohol when they go to a social gathering to socialize.
Yeah.
And this isn't just people who have social anxiety. This is like almost everyone. They need to drink to socialize. And
social lubricant. That's what they call it, social lubricant, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's okay to an extent, I guess. I don't drink much myself, but I think if somebody is watching this and they're considering taking medication, you should know that there's like a commonly accepted view that every mental type of everything wrong with you mentally is like a chemical imbalance, and you need medication to fix it, like depression or anxiety. And that's simply not the case. It's a lot to do with belief systems and your habitual thought patterns, and those can be changed.
Yeah.
And there have been plenty of scientific studies that have done combined like tests against placebos or mindfulness meditation, and they've performed equally well as medication. So.
Yep. I've seen those too. And by the way, of course, we're not doctors. We don't give medical advice. This is just our opinion. So, but you have to check with your doctor. That's up to you. If you want to use medication and all that, that's totally up to you. But I'm of the same thing of these pharmaceutical companies, very interesting companies what they do and how
Mm-hmm.
they make money. And sure, there are medications out there, especially for extreme things that they've shown, but the stuff is can be quite dodgy when it comes to anxiety and even depressive disorders at times, depending on what we're talking about. I'm saying depending, but whether it's placebo effect or the fact that they were given a pill by an authority figure, and so because they know, I've seen this a study on this where they say that because you're given an authority, you believe it, and because you start seeing the side effects, you believe it, you're on it, and so you believe it's working.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I think it's interesting to think about when we think about medication and the side effects and things like that as well. Now, if somebody is so bad in social anxiety, and that's what it takes to get them up to the baseline level so they can start doing the work on themselves, hey man, no judgment, that's fine.
Yeah.
But, and I'm glad that most people agree, because I've seen so many times they comment and say, well, it didn't work, it worked and then it stopped. It didn't actually address the root of the problem. It's just masking the symptoms. It's not addressing the thought patterns, the emotional patterns, and really getting in there and seeing what's happening from inside themselves and kind of expanding the reality and pushing their into their challenge zone, out of their comfort zone, because it's more comfortable to be socially anxious than it is actually to challenge it. And it's not aware of it. And I always say, to the point you're at when you realize you have it, don't blame yourself for having it, that you're here. But if you really want to overcome this type of thing, you've got to take responsibility, response-ability to do it, and you really got to commit. Like it's not it's not a small commitment or necessarily an easy thing to do, but it can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not a doctor either, so what I'm saying is just my personal opinion, but it is based in research and like what I've seen working with people who have social anxiety. And what I relate it to is what I relate overcoming social anxiety to often is losing weight, because there's a lot of people who try to lose weight and they fail, and it's because it's not easy. It's simple. The process for losing weight is actually pretty simple. Eat less, exercise more, but it's not easy to do and to follow up with it, because it involves a lot of negative emotions, breaking old habits, overcoming past addictions, like psychological addictions.
Yeah.
So
agreed. And emotional addiction. We get addicted to those emotional patterns, which is so hard to see when we're in it, because it's like a subconscious thing on a more subconscious level.
Yeah.
And getting more awareness and feeling into those emotions and actually experiencing them. And I say that we are so trained to run from our emotions and not experience them. It doesn't mean to act on our emotions in like a superficial way, like a dramatic thing, but to actually experience what they are and to get awareness around them, and that we can actually have control over our emotional world in that sense, instead of running and hiding or popping a pill or going to eat McDonald's or watching a TV show just to get away from what we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on it. So we're getting to some pretty deep stuff here, and for you guys listening, interested to hear what you guys think, because this will be up on YouTube and various places to hear your comments. I had a question the other day from a subscriber, I believe, that they were asking, about the videos I have, and I have my also my course, the Dissolve Social Anxiety video audio course, and you have your ebook course, about exposure work. And is that necessary to overcome this thing? Can you just do a course at home and kind of figure it all out, or do you have to do exposure work? Which means exposing yourself to situations directly where you experience social anxiety.
Basically what my system teaches is that you do need to do exposure. And it's not just the exposure by itself. You also need to do it in a specific way in order to unwire the anxiety pattern in your brain. But the first step to do is to stop avoiding the situations which cause you to feel anxiety. And
Yeah.
in my opinion, there's no way around that. Like, it is going to take pushing yourself into discomfort and becoming used to, um, like, when you see a situation that you might have tried to avoid in the past or run away from in the past, you have to um, decide to push into it while still being afraid to do it. So, like, feeling the fear in your body, but still doing what you're afraid to do, whether that's public speaking or talking to someone on the phone or going into a job interview or whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in my opinion, exposure is like, it's not everything, but it's absolutely like a fundamental building block to overcoming shyness or social anxiety. What's your opinion on this question?
There's no way around it. There's absolutely no way around exposure. You know, there's so many things like visualization and stuff and mental rehearsal, and there's something to it. But, you know, and some people say, well, the mind can't tell the difference. Well, if the mind can't, the body certainly can, because I know I've been through it, and you have too. And if you think you're going to be able to sit at home and visualize yourself out of social anxiety, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen, or it's going to be the extremely rare case. It's not that you can't support yourself and do stuff at home. Absolutely, to do that, but we have to expose ourselves. And I say we want to do it in an incremental way and ramp up. We don't, we don't want to jump into the most difficult thing at first. It doesn't make any sense. And that's the traditional cognitive behavior therapy, behavioral hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that in my program as well, amongst some other approaches. And I think that you have to do it, but it's a matter of what does it take for a human being to shift their patterns and change, and it's got to be clearly it can't be where they're at. They can't stay doing what they're doing, and they can't stay believing what they're believing and feeling what they're feeling in a certain regard, or experiencing their feelings and emotions in the same way. It has to be done so it pushes outside of their comfort zone just enough so it's a challenge, but not too much so that it all collapses in and they give up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how progress is made. And from everything I've read, studied, done, it's like, and there are ups and downs. It's not this constant curve. It's more like you make progress, you go back down. It's called a setback, and it's kind of like a wavy thing. But overall, you're making progress over time. And that timeline, hard to say, depends on how long you've had it, number one. What your experiences was of getting it and how deep that goes for you, and your commitment to doing it, usually over the course of years, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
For most, not everybody. I had a subscriber who said, hey, I'm unsubscribing because your free stuff helps so much. Great, and I don't need to be here anymore. Thank you. A rare case, but this person may not have been a deeper level, and they clearly were very committed, very committed, and using my sources and some other sources, and really going out there and doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the exposure part is like, it's not. See, the problem is it's not a very sexy marketing appeal to say you have to push into your fear, but
Nope.
that's definitely a part of it. And I think the second part, because basically what we both teach is like a cognitive behavioral type of approach.
Yep.
So that's like the behavioral approach. You have to change your behavior
Yep.
if you want to get different results. It's like there's an old saying, if you keep doing what you've always been doing, you'll keep getting the same results you've always been getting. So, and I
That's
think the
right.
second part is the cognitive approach, which has to do with like your belief systems, your habitual thought patterns, emotional addictions, and so on. So, David, what do you think what do you think are like the main types of beliefs that people with social anxiety have that they need to unwire along with exposure?
The main ones, and I see them all the time, are I got to say the right thing, aka perfectionism. I got to say or do the right thing, or I don't know the right thing to do or say,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking that and I need to know that first, and I don't know what it is, keeps them locked in kind of a double bind. That's one. Another one is everybody is watching me and staring at me, and they can all tell that I have social anxiety, and it's just not it's absolutely not true. It's called the cognitive distortion of like an absolutism versus relativism. So some people might, but when you say everybody, you know you're in cognitive distortion big time, because not everybody does. And that continues on a feedback loop of they could be, you could walk in a grocery store and see somebody laughing, and they're on their phone, and they turn and look at you as they laugh. And because you're socially anxious and your belief system is filtering for evidence, that piece of evidence gets pulled in when they